plane crash for one. If I can go back to the plane crash for just 1 second.
You're interrupting your colleague, but sure.
Sorry, I thought you called on me.
I called on Lindsay.
He is not ordering
Lindsay,
flights
go
to
ahead.
be flown in half staff.
Lindsay, go ahead. Thank you.
A reporter tried to interrupt Karoline Leavitt, but she quickly shut them down. In her latest briefing, she spoke on the tragic mid-air crash near Washington, D.C., and addressed other issues with facts and clarity.
Do you think they're out of touch with Americans demanding action on our border crisis?
The media out of touch? I think the media certainly is out of touch, and I think that's proven by a number of things, John. Number one, there was a New York Times poll that was released prior to President Trump's inauguration by the New York Times, which of course is a legacy media outlet, that showed that 83% of Americans support deporting the individuals that you mentioned.
That says a lot about how out of touch the media is. Even when most people agree on something, left-leaning outlets still try to paint it as extreme.
97% of the deportations that this administration has made thus far are of individuals who had a removal order from the previous administration. This shows that the previous administration was actually defying our laws, and all this administration is doing is simply following the laws, the immigration laws of this great country.
Nearly all the deportations under Biden's administration were of people who had already been ordered to leave under Trump, but were never actually removed. That just proves the previous administration wasn't enforcing the law like they claimed. Now that Trump is back, his administration is following through on what should have been done years ago.
The Black Hawk helicopter was flying too high by a lot. It was far above the 200-foot limit. That's not really too complicated to understand, is it? Is he suggesting a helicopter malfunction or a crew error or a crew doing this intentionally?
She got straight to the point and didn't leave any room for guessing. But you can tell the press was not satisfied.
No, the president is simply stating what he said in that Truth Social post, which is that the helicopter was flying higher than it should have been, which is one of the reasons that led to this collision. And the other reasons for that are still being investigated, and I will let that investigation play out.
It's funny how the media acts like Trump's words are some kind of riddle. There was nothing to decode.
Millions, maybe tens of millions of Americans who voted for President Trump were excited about his plans to do away with taxes on tips, overtime, Social Security benefits. But there's uncertainty about the timing of this. So can you clarify for them when this is going to happen? And does President Trump want to study in all three of those in the first batch of legislation early this year?
Her response showed that he is committed to following through on his plan for the country.
President Trump is committed to lowering taxes for Americans, cutting taxes for Americans. The president has made it very clear to our allies on Capitol Hill that is a critical piece of this reconciliation package, and he expects that his tax cuts from 2017, which put a lot more money back into the American people's pockets, those must be implemented, and no tax on tips. The president is intent on delivering on that promise, and he will get it done.
That is a huge win for restaurant workers, bartenders, and anyone who depends on tips to get by.
Can you guarantee that those tariffs won't increase prices for Americans, including at the gas pump and the grocery store?
I think Americans who are concerned about increased prices should look at what President Trump did in his first term. He effectively implemented tariffs, and the average inflation rate during the first Trump administration was 1.9%. In fact, when President Trump left office, it was 1.4%.
Trump used tariffs before, and prices stayed steady, but after he left, inflation went up. Tariffs weren't the issue, it was what came after.
President Trump is going to do everything he possibly can to cut the inflation crisis that the previous administration imposed on the American people, and he will continue to effectively utilize tariffs.
If those tariffs do increase prices for Americans, will the administration reverse them?
That's a hypothetical question, and the president is intent on ensuring that he effectively implements tariffs while cutting inflation and costs for the American people.
He sees inflation as something the last administration caused, and he has a plan to fix it. He's not backing down on tariffs, no matter how much the media questions it.
The media has this way of just looking at everything in a microscope rather than looking at the whole of government economic approach that this president is taking. He will effectively implement tariffs. He's also, as I just answered Prince Stephen's question, committed to tax cuts. He's also clearly committed, as evidenced by his executive orders, to unleashing the might of our energy industry, which we know will eventually drive down inflation, and all the other economic measures that this president has made.
Another reporter brought up the plane crash again, and things got a bit tense.
Yes, Lindsay.
Can I go back to the plane crash for one? Can I go back to the plane crash for just 1 second?
You're interrupting your colleague, but
I'm
sure.
sorry, I thought you called on me.
I called on Lindsay.
The president this morning said the Black Hawk helicopter was flying too high. I'm wondering if he's basing that on what he learned from investigators, and if you could offer a little bit more of a window into how he is keeping abreast of this investigation.
Sure.
Is the NTSB briefing him separately? Is he meeting in the Situation Room?
It's clear they want to challenge Trump's statement, maybe even catch Leavitt slipping.
Yeah, the president based that statement on truth, because it is truth and it's fact, and it was relayed to him by the authorities who are overseeing the investigation into this horrific plane collision. And the president, as I said in my opening remarks, continues to be briefed on the collision by everybody across his cabinet, the Secretary of Transportation, the Secretary of Defense, the NTSB, who the commissioner there was in the Oval Office with him yesterday.
She wanted to make one thing clear. Trump isn't just making random guesses. He's getting information straight from top officials, including those leading the investigation.
Are you not afraid that more incidents of different kind could happen with less staffing in different agencies?
Well, the president is intent on ensuring that we are increasing staffing at these agencies, and that's why he signed a very strong executive order on his second day in office, immediately terminating DEI hiring practices at the FAA. He also, following the tragic crash,
She also made sure to highlight Trump's direct action on the issue.
as you all know, in the Oval Office yesterday, signed a memorandum directing an immediate assessment of the FAA to ensure the federal government is maintaining the highest personnel and aviation safety standards.
The Trump administration's strategy is to show they're already taking action, not just responding to concerns.
If you are an American who has spent many years studying aviation, and you graduate from school and you're an air traffic controller based on skill and merit, and then you apply for a job and you're forced to fill out a biographical questionnaire asking you the color of your skin and asking you where you're from in details that aren't relevant at all to the job description, I think that deteriorates the morale of people in this industry. And if you talk to people in this industry, they'll tell you that.
She's shifting the attention to real experiences in the system instead of focusing on numbers and policies.
When you are flying on an airplane with your loved ones, which every one of us in this room has, do you pray that your plane lands safely and gets you to your destination, or do you pray that the pilot has a certain skin color? I think we all know the answer to that question, and as President Trump said yesterday, it's common sense.
She also voiced the president's stance on DEI hiring and questioned how it affects merit-based decisions.
With a moment of silence for the victims of the air crash and the president's own invocation of, quote, a loving God. And then he uncorked that expletive to insult a former cabinet officer. It was the same expletive that I saw him use in East Room in 2020 when he famously held up the Trump acquitted headline.
President Trump shared his condolences with the victims' families and suggested that DEI hiring practices might have played a role in the crash.
How the president perceives his use of public profanity, which is a practice that certainly sets him apart from all of his predecessors. Does he regard it as an effective communications device, part of his appeal, or is it something that he lapses into inadvertently, perhaps in times of frustration and later regrets?
They know exactly how Trump is, yet they still act surprised and question his behavior.
I think one of the things that the American people love most about this president is that he often says what they are thinking, but sometimes lack the courage to say themselves. And I think yesterday at this podium, you heard President Trump express great frustration, perhaps even anger, with the previous administration's policies, many of which have led to the crises that our country is currently facing and that this president is focused on fixing.
When he spoke about the FAA hiring, it sparked a lot of controversy, with some people calling his comments unfair and insensitive. But as Karoline Leavitt pointed out, he makes his statements based on facts.